What is up, YouTube? We're back at it again. It's been quite a while since we made a video. Just with the holidays and everything, took a little break, but we are ready to pound through some more work. Hopefully put the finishing touches on this bug and really make it a daily driver. So as you can see, we kind of rearranged the garage a little bit. We got the truck over there, the bug here, and our welding bench is here. And you can see in this video, what we're gonna plan to get done is the battery relocate trunk panel. We're going to try to get a horn in here, and we also got some top line front suspension, so we're going to be installing that as well. And at that point, we're going to be pretty much ready to drive this on a day-to-day basis. Some other things we do have a muffler we may get to in this video, and we also have our reverse light switch. But the main stuff we're going to do is show you guys how to relocate the battery and how to wire that up. We're going to reinstall our kind of spare tire well trunk panel with the battery up there in mind, and then we're going to do our front suspension. So tune in now and we'll show you that. And so you can see standard, the battery in the bug sits right under the rear passenger seat. So our plan is going to be to take it out from there. We're going to create a battery tray, and we're going to install it up here to hopefully help with weight distribution, but also mainly just to get it out of the passenger compartment, because I really don't like that. So we'll show you how we make the battery tray, how we install it up here, and how we wire everything in next. Alright, so we get all the pieces cut up to make kind of like the main tray. So now what I'll do is I'll clean them all up, get them fitted, and I'll tack them together real quick. Test fit them with the battery, and if everything fits together good, like I'm hoping, we'll just add in a tab on each side where we can add like all thread, and then we'll have a little like bridge across the top that kind of clamps it all down. But yeah, first thing is getting this base together, so we'll do that now. Alright, so you can see we got the base all welded up. Came out pretty good, but not great. There's a lot of big gaps. I think it's just because I was using my Harbor Freight saw, so the angles weren't perfect. So it left us with some gaps, whatever. Long story short, it's working. And you can see here, we got the battery now. And we take it, and we can put it and drop it right in. And it fits good. So now the next thing we'll do is we'll actually build up a tab on each side to allow us to put some threaded rod on both edges so that we can put a bar across the tarp to clamp it down. So the next thing we'll do is work on the tabs and then the top clamp piece. So with the same angle iron, we tacked on some tabs that we'll use for threaded rod. So I'll have to run to the store tomorrow to get that, so that's when we'll get back to this. From there, we'll build up the threaded rod, the cross piece, and we'll have a full assembly that'll hold in the battery. Then from there, we'll weld this into the trunk, and then we'll build out the trunk panel around it. Alright, so we have the all thread now. I grabbed 3/8 16th. I grabbed 3 feet of it because that's all I had, and I wanted to show you guys a little trick you may or may not know. So I marked where I'm going to cut it, and you can see I have a nut on either side, and the idea is I'll actually, and I don't really need to do this because it's threaded the whole length, so I could technically, even after I cut it, bring the nut on. But the idea is the threads are probably going to be rough here where I cut it, and you can use the nut basically to help clean up the threads and back it out on the cut edge. So this really helps with like bolts. So say I had a bolt that I wanted to cut to length, and just imagine this isn't here. But say I had a bolt I wanted to cut down, I could cut it, and then I could back this nut off it, and it'll help clean up the threads as we went off. That's if you don't have a die tool to clean up the threads. So, and even sometimes it can be hard to get them on, so just it's nice to have a nut on the, I guess you'd say upstream of the cut, so you can back the nut off of it and it'll help clean the threads just by using the nut on its own. So now I'll cut this to length. I'll do 2 pieces and we'll put them on here and add the cross bracket, and then we'll kind of make sure everything fits good, finish weld everything, and call the frame part of it done. All right, and this is where we're at. I'm actually really happy with it. As you guys probably saw, I added this round tube here just to kind of reinforce this piece, because I was a little worried about it bending and kind of being the main thing holding this battery into its tray. This isn't tightened all the way, but I'm really happy with it. So now that we have this all set, we'll do some finish welding at some point. But actually, I think the first thing we'll do is we'll actually get it fitted up in the trunk. And I think originally I was gonna just weld it into the sheet metal. I think I'm gonna try to figure out a way to bolt it in just to be a little extra cautious with it. So I'm gonna jack it up and see if there's a way I can kind of, I'll probably add a tab here and on the other side, and you know, have like a plate underneath to bolt it to, just to kind of reinforce the sheet metal. So I'll show you that as I go along. All right, we're jumping around a little bit, but just doing some little mock-ups with the battery tray. I think it's gonna make more sense to actually get our trunk panel fitted in first, and then we can mount the battery tray to the new panel. So you can see here, what we have going on is I have the, really the only interference we're gonna run into is that fuel pump. So what we'll do here, what I'm thinking, is I'll cut out a little window in this one for where the fuel pump will be. We'll kind of get this fit in as good as possible to the normal place, and we'll have like a little access panel to get to the fuel pump there. And then on this side of it, we'll actually just end up cutting it down, you know, somewhere, pretty much somewhere along here, so that we can make another piece of metal that goes to that and allows us to have kind of like a shroud to help the air go out of the trunk and, you know, out the wheel wells. So we'll fit the new piece and probably trim it back and add another piece to be like our radiator shroud. So we'll just show you that in the process as we build it out. Alright, we got a test fit in here and it's actually looking pretty good. I mean, this car did have a pretty good front end wreck at some point before I had it, so it's a little, it's not perfectly straight over here, but everything else is looking pretty good. And you guys are probably laughing seeing that I bought this piece just to cut up as much as I did. But now, you know, we'll get this fit, we'll use some Clecos to kind of hold it into place. And then we'll make a panel that kind of just covers here so that we can get to the fuel pump if we ever need to. And then we'll actually probably end up cutting this back a little more to make our shroud to cover the radiator and kind of direct the air underneath this rather than into this area where the battery will be. So we'll work on that now. And here's where we're at. We're kind of filling in the trunk and making the radiator shroud at the same time. I just want to show you it. So we put one bend in right there, and we're holding it with the Clecos, and now we just need to make a little clearance for where the, I guess it'd be like the inlet for the radiator. So we'll make a little cutout for it, and then we'll patch in a hump, because that's kind of the best way I can think of doing it. And then we'll add our second bend right around here, and we'll actually use these to double for our bolt location for the radiator shroud. Alright, so we got our little hole cut out for the inlet, like I was saying. It's not beautiful, but we'll clean it up, and then in the end we're gonna just weld a hump over it, but this was just to allow it to allow it clearance. So now you can see we're ready to make our bend right here across, and we'll bring it down flat, and then we'll use these as our last points. Yeah, and we'll do that first before we patch this hole here, just to make sure that everything fits right, because if we bend it and something gets weird or we don't like how it fits, then there's no point in patching this hole anyways. Alright, so this is where we're at. It's actually fitting pretty good. Pretty happy with it. I have this kind of trimmed down just a little bit. Next thing I'm really going to target is kind of filling in. We're going to make a bracket that I'm going to weld to the trunk panel that will have like a bolt for here. So that's kind of what we're going to work on right here on both sides, and also at the same time kind of fill in the gap here as best we can, and then we'll trim it back. You see I marked with a chalk line where it lines up, so we can kind of cut it back, and I'll make a smooth transition just for everything pulling under to just kind of go out the wheel well. So that's what we'll focus on next, and I'll show you guys kind of an update when we get there. Alright, so this is where we're at. You can see here, this is the bracket I was talking about. I think what I'm going to end up doing is either welding it or riveting it here. We're going to just use the temporary rivets for now, the Cleco, so I figured it out. You can see I got the driver's side, and I had a problem. I just kind of whipped. I bent it in the wrong spot. I kind of mismeasured or mismarked it. But you can kind of see what we're going for. So this was tucked up in there, just like how this one is here, kind of tucked up in. So we have a flange on the back that we can connect to. And then we have a little bit of a gap here, just gotta trim things back too far, so we'll fill that in as we go. But we're getting pretty close. I mean, this isn't too bad. We'll make the brackets, and then once we have it all out is when we'll fill the gaps in. And that'll be everything for this front piece, more or less. Obviously, we still gotta cover this up. And then the next thing we'll really work on, once we have this all squared away, is just to cover back here to cover the fuel pump. And then we'll be good. So I'm pretty happy with it. But like I said, there's a lot going on here. I'd be lying if I didn't say I feel a little in over my head just with how much I had cut out previously. But we're getting there. We're going to patch it in piece by piece. And a lot of it we're going to make removable just so we can get to things like the radiator lines and stuff like that if we need to. And here's where we're at for an update. We have our radiator shroud in. We have our cover for our fuel pump in. And we have our battery bracket tray kind of mocked up. So what I'll need to do next is kind of get a final spot for that battery tray, and I think I'm going to weld it in. And then from there we will finish fitting everything up. It's getting pretty close, as you can see. Once we have the battery fitted in, we can finally run the lines.
back to where we need them to, the electric lines, and we can kind of be done with the battery relocate. But as you can tell, this kind of blew up into a lot more work of just sheet metal than doing the actual battery part of it. So we'll work these pieces. You can see here, I kind of cut this as a flange, so we'll box this in to kind of protect the battery. I mean, it doesn't really need much protection, but kind of block the battery from any hot air blowing. And we'll use the same stuff that we used in the firewall video, which I'll put the link here. Like I was saying, we'll put the same stuff that we put in the firewall, the Thermatech heat barrier. Put the link to this firewall video here so you can see that. But we'll do it on anything that's kind of either going to vibrate or need insulation. So we'll do it on the radiator shroud in that back piece. We probably won't do it in the trunk panel piece because it's not really necessary, but we'll at least cover up the pieces that we kind of retrofitted in here. So yeah, now it's really just a little more fine tuning, a little fitting things up a little bit better. And like I said, we'll probably weld the battery tray in place, and then we'll final fit everything up and start removing the clecos and replacing them with the riv nuts for the most part. So here we go. All right, so we were originally going to weld this bracket in, but because this is kind of flimsy here, we're actually going to create some bracket systems that I can bolt in. I'm going to create a mount here that connects to, and something in the back that it connects to, and that'll add some rigidity and really make sure this is secured in here so it doesn't come flying if anything were to ever happen. So we'll work on the bracketry and everything now, and then from there we can kind of just like finish everything off, paint the pieces, and we can bolt it all together and run the finally start running the lines for the actual battery relocate. Alright, so I'm back from some business travel. Where we left off is I was finishing up this pedestal piece where I basically welded a nut into it, and the goal is I'm going to trim it to fit to go underneath here, and we will have a bolt connection then once I weld this to the battery tray. This will kind of be how we get it in place. So I gotta trim it down just a little bit, really just barely, to fit underneath this tab. And then once we know it's fitted, we'll weld the tab in place, and then we'll move on to a bolt in the back, which we'll show you how we do once we get there. Alright, for whatever reason I'm having a lot of trouble with my camera, but I just want to give you guys an update. So we have this little pedestal welded in here with a threaded nut. And so what we have so far is one of the 3 spots that will mount this battery tray. So you see I've also welded this tab on here. So when this is assembled, and I'm only doing this one hand, so I'm not going to get this in perfect, but you can see we have this here to hold it in one spot. And then what we'll do is we'll add 2 tabs here, and we'll have a plate that goes across the bottom underneath here with all the nuts on it, so we can bolt, and it'll be kind of held all in place with that at that point, and we should be good to go. Before we can paint this hull is to fill in this gap right here and that gap right there. At the beginning when I started this, I just took out too much material, but as you guys can see, I've done all the nut certs, so everything is now held in place with actual Allen bolts, or Allen bolts, and we have a couple more here for this back panel which we haven't put in yet. But so we're getting really close. Like I said, we got to fill these 2 patches in and actually make this little cover piece, which will be pretty quick. So we're going to start with those little patches, and we'll end with this, paint it all up, and we will be good to go. Then we just run the wires. which the whole thing was supposed to be a battery relocate, but you know, it took a little work to get there. So we'll do it now. This is another perspective. This is all taken out of the trunk and reassembled. But you can see I just want to patch here and here. So we'll do that real quick and I'll just time lapse it. Alright, so we got the trunk panel all set. That was actually really cool. That's the first time I've done like actual sheet metal and it didn't go too bad. We just migged it all. So with that, the last thing we have to do is our little shroud cover piece. So I'm gonna create a little hump or whatever to go here for our coolant inlet that just gets a little bit in the way. And then I'm also just gonna make little, put little straight pieces here and here to kind of box this in. And this will create kind of a barrier from the hot air on the radiator to the battery. So we'll just box in, and then all this will get the same thermotech that we use on the, on our engine cover in the back. Alright, so we're getting really close to painting all these parts. We did one last finish fitment. Everything is going great. We get all of these kind of ready to go for paint. Any of the battery tray stuff we're going to be doing in black to kind of make it a little discreet. Any of the sheet metal we're actually going to be doing in a red I found, which I think is pretty close to the color of the car. We're going to just send it and hope for the best. You can kind of see them next to each other. That's a satin, so low gloss and everything. I think it should be good. So we have all of these all set. I'm just really cleaning up this last piece here, getting it kind of, I don't want any of the black to show through, so roughing it all up, trying to take as much of the black kind of shipping paint. This is just like a rust preventative paint. It's not like a heat paint or anything. So just getting that all cleaned off, and then we should be good to go. So I'm not going to bother showing you much of this. I'm just going to show you guys the final installation because I think you guys are all going to be impressed like I'm going to be. All right, everyone. I am super happy with how this came out. One huge whiff, I'll just start with the bad news, is I didn't realize that the Sharpie was going to bleed right through. So anything that I wrote, like fill, anything like that, it bled through. So for any of you doing something like this, just remember to clean off the Sharpie before you paint it, just to be safe. But otherwise, I'm really happy with it. The color match wasn't perfect. This red is actually a lot nicer than what's in the car, but overall, I'm really happy with it. We got the battery tray in. So the final thing to do is to get the battery in there and finally run the wires, which really shouldn't be too involved. And my plan originally was to make this video about the battery, but as you can see, a lot of it was just revolving around finally patching up this trunk. So now I'll put the battery in, we'll run the wires, and we will be all set. All right, so now that we got everything in the trunk, let me just make sure I showed you guys it to be certain. We got the battery in here and everything now. I'm really happy with it. I think it looks great. But so yeah, now that we have everything in the trunk and ready to go, we have our wiring set up, and this is what I've kind of been looking forward to. So what we're gonna do, you see here we have an isolation switch or a battery kill switch. We have, this is like a post with several smaller lugs for your like accessories. We have some actual crimp lugs for the wiring. We have 1-0, which is, they call it like welding gauge wire. And we have a crimping tool. I bought all of these on Amazon, so I'll provide the link below. But just so you guys are aware kind of what we're trying to do, let me see if I can do this for you. So what I'm hoping is, let me get this pencil working. So we have the battery, our battery, and we have plus and minus. Now I'm hoping I can just take the minus and ground that in the trunk. Maybe on the mounting bolt we have for the actual battery tray. And then with our positive lead, it's gonna go through the cabin to where our battery used to be. It's gonna hit this isolation switch. I don't really remember all the drawings, but that's our isolation switch. So that no power gets to anything without the key in. This is kind of cool. It has this little plastic key that's actually provides continuity when you put it in there. So this is almost equivalent to an ignition switch since we don't really have one, like an ignition key in our car. So it'll go from the isolation switch, then it'll go to our little lug, which on that will get the power from the isolation switch, and that will also go to the starter motor. And then we also have our small little pins for anything on our relay panel that we have in the back of the car. So I'm gonna run that now. So what we'll do is, I think what I'll make is like a little bracket to mount both these on. I am a little nervous. Because there's not really good isolation between these two pins. So if they bridge, the switch essentially does nothing. Like if you get an arc between these, you don't need the key in because they're just gonna bridge across the posts. So I may try to do something here to provide some isolation. But I think what I'll do in general is I'll put both of these on like a bracket and I'll mount that into under the passenger seat in the back where the battery would be. But these will be small and nice and discreet. Just kind of a good way for me to manage my power. So we'll get into that now. I think I'll probably start with the bracket just so I kind of have a layout of where this all is. And then we'll get it into the back seat and kind of figure out where it's all gonna go. So we got a coat of paint on this real quick. Everything's kind of mounted. We got our mounting holes for in the car, and we have them transferred in the car as well. Really, all we have to do is, we have these little studs here, and you can see originally we were using the studs on this terminal, so they're a little larger. So all we have to do is, for the wires that are going in this, we just have to cut off the, what the hell are they called? The ring terminals. We have to cut off the ring terminals and just put a smaller ring on, which we have those. And then I'm actually going to just reuse this for up at the battery to kind of save myself. But I'll show you guys real quick how we have it set up. So we have the switch, our isolator switch, and our lug. And what we'll basically do is we will install it where the battery was, right around here, roughly. We'll install it where the battery was, right about there. You can see right here we have all my positive leads that we're going over to that mess of wires, which we'll get to another time, but that's kind of like our relay panel and our ECU. So here's a couple of the leads that need power. So these are the ones that's saying we'll just put new ring terminals on. And then this guy is to the starter, which we'll also put on the same lug that the battery power comes to. And so here we're gonna use one of these guys, one of these like 3/8 inch lugs to go onto here, and that will pretty much complete everything. So we'll have all our power basically exactly how it's run at the battery. This will just be a replacement for the battery, and you can see I already have my power wire ran. We'll tuck it under the carpet, but you can see I actually have it ran all the way up, and surprisingly, or not surprisingly maybe for some of you that are more familiar, there's actually already a hole right back here. It's kind of hard to see because of the lighting, but there's actually a hole right there with a grommet, and it's almost the perfect size for the wire, so we ran it right through. Fortunately, everything's red, so it blends real nice. We'll put like probably some kind of P-clamp here to kind of keep it away and up off of any metal, just to keep it from abrading or anything. And then it's a straight shot right to here, and we'll reuse our we'll reuse that terminal I showed you to connect to the battery, and then we'll reuse our ground strap that's in the back, run it here, and we'll put it on that mounting post that is welded to the pan, which should be perfect for ground. So I kind of named off a lot of things, but all those are really small items, so we should be able to get this done pretty quick and have the car back up and running tonight, hopefully. All right, so quick update. We have the power wire terminated, I guess you'd say. I just have it back here so it doesn't accidentally touch the battery. We have the ground strap moved up here, and it was actually perfect length that we can do one of these, a little loop to it, and it'll be perfect. So that's another huge win there, that we don't have to make a new ground line. Little panel mounted. We have everything run. We have the new, all our lines here have the new rings that we need for the right stud. The only problem I ran into, I should say the only unexpected problem I ran into was the starter wire is, and I wasn't thinking, but this is a different gauge than the lugs I have. So this is like really beat and kind of brittle. So I'm just gonna replace this with the same 1/0 gauge wire I have, which is probably overkill, but it's what I have, and I have the lugs for it. So that's really one extra step we're gonna do just to make sure everything's wired in well. So once we add in the starter wire and kind of just finish off all these little things I pointed to, which is really just connecting the terminals, we should be able to fire up and make sure everything works all right. What I'm going to do, and I would probably advise all of you to do the same if you do a project like this, is when it comes time to fire up, we will definitely keep the fire extinguisher close by.
Alright, so as you guys can see, we're kind of wrapped up with the battery relocation, the frunk, the front trunk, the spare tire well, patching. Everything came together really well. The car started right up when we were done, so I'd call that a success. Because of how involved that was, I'm not gonna add in the front suspension in this video. I'm gonna get in and start editing because I know I have a ton of footage. The sheet metal was just a lot more involved than I'd planned. So with all that, we'll have a video probably in a week, hopefully. I'm trying to be a little more consistent. So hopefully in a week, we'll have a video of the front suspension, the top line, which I'm super excited for. I just want to get this really kind of less enjoyable work dealt with. So now we can get to the front line suspension kind of as a, the front top line suspension kind of as a celebration that we got the battery relocate done. So if you guys like what you saw, please hit the like button. Please subscribe for more content and share with your friends, and hope to see you again soon.